I suppose if you're watching this, somebody you love is getting older. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's your mother or your father or your husband who doesn't move the way he used to. Maybe you're sitting in a kitchen right now with a brochure from some assisted living place, and it looks clean and professional, and the people in the photographs are smiling, and still, something in your chest says no. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to tell you what I did, and why I'd do it again. My name is Thomas Whitaker. Most people call me Tom. I am 75 years old, and I live alone in a house in Asheville, North Carolina, the same house I bought in 1986 with money I saved running a hardware store on Haywood Road for 31 years. The store is gone now, Helen is gone now, but the house is still here, and so am I, which is more than some people expected. Let me go back a bit. I started working at 14, stocking shelves at a feed supply off Patton Avenue. By 22 I had saved enough to lease a storefront and open my own place. Whitaker's Hardware. Small shop, honest inventory. I sold nails and lumber and paint and plumbing fittings and about 10,000 things people didn't know they needed until something broke. I liked the work because it was simple at the center. Someone walks in with a problem. You help them find the part. They fix it. That was the whole transaction. No ambiguity. No pretending. Just a man with a leaky faucet and a 70-cent washer that would solve it. I met Helen Greer in 1978 at a church cookout I didn't want to attend. She was laughing at something someone said near the potato salad table, and her laugh carried across the yard the way a screen door carries across a summer evening. Impossible to ignore, impossible to resent. I introduced myself. She said, "You look like you'd rather be somewhere else." I said, "I was somewhere else until about 10 seconds ago." We married 5 months later. People said it was fast. It didn't feel fast. It felt like I had finally found the part I didn't know was missing. Helen was a dental hygienist with opinions about everything and patience for almost everyone. She managed the books at the store on weekends. She knew every customer's name and most of their children's names and a fair number of their dogs' names. I was the inventory. She was the reason people came back. We had 2 kids, Michael in 1980, Sarah in 1983. I coached Little League poorly and attended every school play and built a treehouse that leaned 11 degrees to the left but never fell. I was not a perfect father, but I was a present one, which I think counts for more than people admit. The decades passed the way they do when you're working. I opened the store at 7, closed it at 6 days a week for 31 years. I replaced the roof twice. I survived 3 recessions and a Lowe's opening 4 miles away. I hired teenagers who didn't know a Phillips head from a flathead and trained them until they did. I kept the books honest and the shelves full and the coffee hot. And when I finally closed the store in 2009, I stood in the empty space for a long time and realized I didn't know who I was without it. A hardware store is not just a business, it's an identity. You are the man who fixes things. Take that away and you're just a man, standing in an empty room, holding keys to a door that no longer matters. Helen kept me moving after retirement. We traveled some Savannah, the Outer Banks, once to Nashville because she wanted to see the Ryman. I went along. I carried the bags, she planned the routes, and I drove them. We had a rhythm that worked the way a good hinge works, quietly, without attention, doing its job so well, you forget it's there. I took her for granted the way you take gravity for granted, not out of cruelty, out of trust that it would always be there. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the winter of 2019. I will not give you the details because the details belong to her, and to me, and to our children. And some things are not meant to be content. I will tell you this, she handled it with more composure than I deserved to witness. She made lists, she organized documents. She told me where the Christmas ornaments were stored and how to descale the coffee maker and which neighbor had a spare key. She was preparing me for a life she would not be part of, and I let her do it because stopping her would have meant admitting what was coming. She died in the spring of 2021. I was beside her. Michael flew in from Raleigh. Sarah drove up from Atlanta. We stood in that hospital room, and I held her hand and felt the moment the warmth left it. And I understood for the first time that there is a kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the absence of the person who made every sound matter. I drove home. I made coffee because that is what my hands knew how to do. I drank it standing at the kitchen counter, looking at the chair where she used to sit, and I thought, this is what the rest of it looks like. The first year was machinery. I maintained the house. I paid the bills. I ate meals that were adequate and joyless. Michael called on Sundays. Sarah called on Wednesdays. I told them I was fine with enough consistency that they believed it, or at least stopped pressing. I mowed the lawn. I changed the furnace filter. I did what needed doing because doing was the only language I had ever been fluent in. Being just being, without a task, was a foreign country I had no visa for. Then the cracks started. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a slow accumulation of evidence that the machine was changing. The first time I couldn't open a jar of pickles. I stood at the counter staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. These were hands that had carried lumber and turned wrenches and built a treehouse with an 11-degree lean. Now they couldn't break a vacuum seal on a jar of Vlasic dills. I ran it under hot water. I used a rubber grip. I got it open eventually. But I stood there for a long time after, not eating the pickles, just looking at my fingers and understanding something I wasn't ready to understand. Then the foggy Tuesday I left the stove on, not a burner, the oven, preheated it for something I never put in, then walked to the living room and read for 2 hours until the smell reached me. Nothing burned, nothing happened. But I sat down at the kitchen table afterward and wrote it down in a notebook, because I knew that if I didn't track these things, I would rationalize them, and rationalization is the most dangerous tool in an old man's kit. Then the fall in the bathroom, November. I stepped out of the shower, my foot caught the edge of the mat, and I went down hard on my left side, hip, elbow, the side of my head against the vanity. I lay on the tile floor for maybe 40 seconds, assessing. Nothing broken. I got up, dried off, got dressed, and told no one. Not Michael, not Sarah, not the neighbor who asks how I'm doing every time she sees me at the mailbox. I told no one because telling someone would make it real, and I was not ready for it to be real. But the world noticed. Michael started calling twice a week instead of once. Sarah sent me links to places with names like Sunrise, Senior Living, and Harmony Village, names designed to sound like destinations instead of what they are. The neighbor started offering to carry my groceries in a voice that had shifted from friendly to careful. I could feel myself being reclassified. I was no longer Tom Whitaker, the man who ran a hardware store for 31 years. I was becoming a situation, a logistics problem for the people who loved me. Then came the visit that changed the math. My friend Earl Parsons had been at a nursing home in Hendersonville since March. His daughter had arranged it after Earl fell twice in 1 week. Good facility, clean. The staff smiled, and the hallways smelled like lemon cleaner, and there were activities posted on a whiteboard near the front desk. Bingo on Tuesdays, movie night on Fridays. Earl had a room with a window that faced a courtyard with a bird bath. It was, by every objective measure, a decent place. I visited on a Saturday. Earl was sitting in a chair by the window, dressed in clean clothes, shaved, alert. He looked fine. He looked like a man being taken care of. We talked about baseball for a while, about a mutual friend who had just become a great-grandfather, about the weather doing what weather does in the mountains in October. Normal talk, comfortable talk. Then Earl got quiet. He looked out the window at the bird bath and said something I have not stopped thinking about since. He said, "They take good care of me here, Tom. I got no complaints. The food's fine. The people are nice. I just don't know what I'm for anymore." He didn't say it with self-pity. He said it the way you'd report a measurement, factual, precise, without decoration. I just don't know what I'm for anymore. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and that sentence sitting in the passenger seat like a physical weight. Earl was safe. Earl was fed. Earl was monitored and medicated and accounted for. And Earl had lost the one thing that no facility can provide, a reason to get out of bed that belongs to you. That night, I sat on my porch and made a decision. I was not going to a nursing home. Not because they are bad. Some are good. Some are necessary. Some people need that level of care, and there is no shame in it. But I did not need it yet, and I was not going to let the fear of what might happen tomorrow take away the life I still had today. The question was not whether I needed help. I did. The question was whether I could build the help around my life, instead of moving my life into the help. So I started building, the way I'd always built, one piece at a time. First, the house. I put grab bars in the bathroom, pulled up the rugs that could trip me, moved the everyday dishes from the upper cabinets to the lower ones, rearranged the bedroom so the path to the bathroom was clear and unobstructed at 3 in the morning. I did this with the same pragmatism I'd used to organize the store. You put the most needed things where they are easiest to reach. You don't fight the building, you adapt it. Second, the help. I hired a woman named Denise, who comes 3 mornings a week. She's not a nurse. She's not a caretaker. She helps with groceries, drives me to appointments when the roads are bad, handles the things I call the small emergencies, the tasks that aren't urgent until the day they are. I resisted this for months. It felt like admitting defeat. What changed my mind was remembering that I had employed people at the store for 31 years. I never once thought hiring someone to stock shelves was a sign of weakness. It was management. This was the same thing. I was managing a life that had changed dimensions, not ending one. Third, the people. This was the hardest part. Helen had been my social life. She scheduled dinners, remembered birthdays, maintained the friendships that I benefited from without maintaining. After she died, those connections thinned to almost nothing. I had to rebuild from scratch, which at 74 felt about as natural as learning a new language in a country you've already lived in for decades. I started going to the Methodist Church on Montfort Avenue, not for God, if I'm honest, though I'm not against him, but for the coffee hour after the service, where men my age sit in folding chairs and talk about nothing important, and somehow that is exactly what I need. I joined a Wednesday morning group that meets at a diner on Merriman. 5 men, all over 70, all still here, all figuring out what that means. We don't call it a support group. We call it breakfast. Fourth, and this was the conversation I dreaded most, the children. I called Michael and Sarah on a Sunday evening and said something I had rehearsed for a week. I said, I don't need you to take care of me. I need you to know the plan. I told them about the house modifications, about Denise, about the church and the breakfast group, and the notebook where I tracked the things my memory tries to hide from me. I told them I had a lawyer and updated documents and a neighbor with a spare key. I said, I have built a structure. It's not perfect, but it holds. What I need from you is not rescue. What I need is for you to trust me the way I trusted myself for 75 years. Sarah cried. Michael asked questions, practical ones, the kind I raised him to ask. They both wanted something safer. I understand that. When you love someone who is getting older, you want certainty that doesn't exist. You want a building with staff and cameras and emergency buttons. You want to delegate the worry to professionals. I don't blame them. But I told them what I believe, which is this. Safety without autonomy is just a comfortable cage, and I am not a man who is built for cages. That was 8 months ago. I still live in my house. I still make my own coffee every morning. I still drive to the grocery store, though I go slower now and park farther from the door because I don't trust myself in tight spaces the way I used to. Denise comes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I go to church on Sundays. I eat breakfast with 4 old men on Wednesday mornings, and we complain about things that don't matter and laugh at things that shouldn't be funny and drive home feeling less alone than when we arrived. My house is not a facility. It is my life, arranged to fit the man I am now instead of the man I was 10 years ago. I am not telling you this because I have the answers. I'm telling you this because when I was sitting on that porch, trying to figure out what came next, I couldn't find anyone who had done it this way. Every article, every brochure, every well-meaning conversation pointed in one direction, toward a building where someone else decides when you eat and when you sleep and what you do between meals. And maybe that's the right direction for some people, but it wasn't right for me. And if you're watching this, it might not be right for you either. At the hardware store, when a customer brought in something broken, a lamp, a cabinet hinge, a screen door that had jumped its track, they'd sometimes say, I think I just need a new one. And most of the time I'd look at it and say, no, you don't. You just need to know which part to replace. That's what I did with my life. I didn't replace it. I didn't hand it over to someone else to manage. I found the parts that weren't working and I replaced those, one at a time, until the thing held again. Independence doesn't mean doing everything yourself. It means making sure nobody else decides for you. I am 75 years old and I am still deciding. That is enough. That is, in fact, everything. If any part of this reached you, even a single sentence, stay. There is more to tell.